Welcome to office hours. Usually I say good morning, but it might be morning for some of you, but it is
Mm,
4 p.m. here on Pacific.
okay.
I'm here with Mike Kilcoyne. Super excited. Let us know in the polls how long you've been using Notion. And we've got a lot of new people here, 1 to 2 months. So it's always good to kind of get a sense of where people are at. Some of you may have seen our original Knowledge Hub back in April, I think it was. And I know Mike has kind of taken it to a new level, and he has his own kind of spin on taking the Knowledge Hub stuff and turning it to super Knowledge Hub. So I'm really excited to see your setup, Mike. Maybe you can give us a little bit of context for even like what you do for a living, kind of how this
Sure.
evolved for you. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Let's see. So for the past couple of years, I've run a video production company. And so I originally actually started using and getting into Notion um, more on like writing scripts and writing a lot of emails and writing like posts for LinkedIn and the like. But more and more, I started to kind of use it for everything, including project management with a lot of my clients,
Mm-hmm.
and including like editing projects and the like. So so its usage has kind of evolved over time. And
As
now
it
as I
does.
sort of yes, yeah. And it's just become my favorite thing of ever. So
And
um,
what were you using before, or were you using it in the same, like, were you using Evernote for things like this?
yeah, man, so I was using Evernote to some degree. Then like Notes, I would turn on for random things, and there was no rhyme or reason behind any of it. Um, and then I was using like Hemingway for writing, and then WordPress, and then Byway, and like media. Like I
All the
basically
tools. Yeah.
used Asana. I pretty much used Basecamp, like everything. I've tried not all of them, but I've tried a large portion of them.
And I'd love to hear
And
in the chat for those of you watching too, like
mm,
what tools are you kind of comfortable with, familiar with? Are you already kind of starting to move your knowledge hub into Notion? It's always kind of fun just to hear, because that's the thing I hear the most is that your information is spread across so many different tools, and obviously that's sort of the magic of Notion. So yeah, let us know in the chat kind of what tools you're maybe already using for your knowledge hub if you have one. Cool.
yeah,
Um,
I'm super curious about that.
yeah.
Because you can replicate and do a lot of this stuff in things like Evernote, but I found it's not nearly as intuitive. It's not nearly as easy to like set up. I just generally,
Evernote.
yeah.
Cool.
Obviously, I'm a huge Notion stan, clearly. So
Yeah.
yes,
Danny from the UK, who's like probably should be in bed right now, but he's going to join us today. Awesome.
yeah.
Files app on the computer. Yeah. Cool.
Evernote and Notion, yeah, and I still use Evernote like for some things, but generally not. Trello,
Cool.
OneNote,
Yeah.
OmniFocus. That's like one of those focus app. Evernote for capture. Yeah.
Notion for
Hmm.
project management, Roam for knowledge linking. Yeah, and it certainly
Yeah.
doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? There's like lots of great tools that Notion can complement as well, and I've seen lots of people use both Notion
Hmm.
and Roam together. But yeah, I'd love to like, why don't we dig in if you want to share anything
Sure.
specific about kind of how your space has evolved, and I can zoom in on your
Totally.
screen. And I'll let
Yeah.
people know, like as Mike's going through this, if you have questions or you want us to slow down or maybe elaborate on, how he did something or why he's doing something, use the ask a question area below, and I'll try and keep an eye on the chat. I know we've had a couple questions that have popped up, but I figure you could give us the tour, and we can always kind of
Yes.
slow down and jump into the questions. Cool.
Totally. And right now it's a little frenetic, and I don't use this homepage section nearly as much as my daily digest, and I'm happy to dig into that. But since the focus of this is on the super knowledge hubs side of things, um, I just a little bit of like context and sort of why behind all of this. I've generally found, and there's research that continues to support this, when you document and write down, and sort of keep track of things that you're consuming, whether that be books or photography or uh, podcasts or, so on and so forth. Like if you actively take time to, sort of reflect on that stuff and think about things that are, interesting and relevant and important, generally it's, you have a much better recollection of it. But beyond that, I think it also turns it into like more of a game. And I'm sure there's also research that supports this as well, that it turns it into more of like like this is an interesting thing I'm learning and sort of uh you know growing my expertise, whether it be in photography or in books and writing and like so on and so forth. And and then it just sort of forces you to think about, okay, like how can I continue to expand my knowledge in that area and dive a little bit further into that. So that's sort of like the thinking behind my super knowledge hubs is I want to create repositories for all of the things that I find super interesting, whether it be my photography, whether it be some of the favorite restaurants I've been to around the world, or books and podcasts I've been consuming, and add additional context to that so that I can also share that with people in my network and be like, oh yeah, I read that book, or actually here's a photo I recently took in Osaka, and here's the original and like a story behind it. It just gives added sort of context, and I think makes it a lot more fascinating. Not to mention fact, and I'll show you guys this one as well. Like you can take this concept of like creating a knowledge hub, and like information that's relevant to you will probably also be super relevant to people. For example, like I have a knowledge hub that's centered around first couple of weeks that you get to Japan. Here's like pretty much everything you should think about and everything you might need. Because I live in
So
Japan
useful
now.
to share. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think because when I got here, I was just like, I don't know what to do, and nothing makes sense to me. Like it's a different language, and a bevy of other things. So I figured, like, why not compile something that I can then hand off to people and be like, here's everything you should like at least be thinking about, and you'll find this really helpful, so that when you get here, you're not like, what do I do?
Totally overwhelmed. Yeah. Love it.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, so well, I'm curious, like, would it be interesting to go through like sort of how I operate my day in Notion and then get to the super knowledge hub, or should I just dive into the
Oh,
knowledge
that's a
hub?
good question, and I'm open to that in the chat too. If people want to see
Yeah.
something specific too, because I know we often get there were some questions that popped in actually, and maybe if it's helpful, I can read those 4 questions. We can decide if it kind of shapes maybe how you approach this, and we can decide if we want to answer them now or if it's going to make sense to dig into them after. So the questions that have come in so far that have a bunch of votes on them: how ideas from different sources. What is your specific process of capture for new entries, editing them, retrieving them for creation of content and sharing? How do I organize a ton of resources like handouts, articles, links, frameworks that I could share with my executive coaching clients into an easy to use repository where we could call up those resources when we need them and share curated collections with specific clients? And then I'm really interested in how to categorize all knowledge, tags, columns, etc. So that might give those might be kind of all over the place. They may or may not be, relevant to what you want to show. But I do think a little bit of both, like seeing the knowledge hub in action or kind of what it looks like. But then also, as you're moving throughout your day, what does that process look like? How often are you using the Notion Clipper to send things in? Is there a review process? Kind of what does all that look like for you? I think both are
Totally
helpful.
Yes, yeah, and we can go through that. The ones that I'm going to show today don't are a lot more sort of like manual effort, because it's like book reviews, photography, and then like the first 30 days in Japan. That a lot of that stuff is basically just information from my head, and then I'm putting it into a thing. So as far as like, I use the Clipper for grabbing articles and the like, but I think for a more detailed breakdown of how to like really leverage the Clipper and I think what was his name? Ali.
Oh, yeah,
I think had
Abdullah?
a yes. I think he had a great crowdcast with you talking about his what is it
Like
called? His,
like the studies and the oh
yes.
yeah, I know like the space repetition,
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah.
it? Or
No, 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 not that. He has like a I'm just the name is escaping me, but he has a template that's for a resonance calendar,
oh yes,
resonance
yes.
calendar. I
Yeah.
think that's great for if you guys are curious about like information on like how to pull in stuff, how to
Yeah.
you know, how to speak more specifically to like articles, videos, and things like you've read online. Um, this stuff is going to focus more on it's a lot more manual effort,
It
which
seems
is
more like the act of creation. It's not just you consuming information. This is you kind of putting your creativity forward, which is
yes,
awesome. Yeah.
yes, 100%. So yeah, so I mean, I guess it might make sense to just kind of dive into one, and then
Let's do it.
as questions and things pop up, people can dig into it. But so one I've recently been working on is sort of a database that just goes into my photography, stories behind it, like some of my favorite photos, and and really just giving additional context behind things. And so basically, and I guess it's the same thing you could essentially accomplish on like Instagram, but then you have this like feed that you really don't have any control over. It's not easy to
Mm.
filter. And then if you want to put stories or edit things later or add like an alternative, uh, you know, for example, like I have sort of like the originals of or like alternative of photos, like all alternative shots. Like you can't really do that in Instagram. Not to mention the fact that like now Facebook has all your information, but that's
Yeah.
a topic
A whole
that I'm
other
not going to get
whole other
into.
crowdcast.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a different. I'm not going to hop on that soapbox, but so for example, like and right now it's all pretty bare bones. I'm gonna continue adding more information like specific lens and stuff like that. That's actually embedded in a lot of these photos, but
Mm.
basically, I wanted to create this database that gives additional context and like stories behind the photos that I've created, um, and in a way that, like, for me, helps me remember it better, and
Yeah.
helps me remember everything behind it, but also gives me an opportunity to like share alternative sort of like angles or shots from like that same shoot that I really like, or editing notes or anything else you can think of that sort of might give context behind like your creative process and give people a sense of like why you do what you do and sort of like the story behind it. So
Yeah.
this is super interesting. But this guy, I think I've been meaning to send him these photos because he gave me his email and I can't find it anywhere. So if anybody knows this guy, but I think his name's Bill and his dog, and we were just like on a yoga hike, like an Airbnb experience. This was like before COVID, where you can actually do things. Um, and we were on like a yoga hike, and he was just there like napping with his dog, and I was taking photos. And I was like, "Do you want a photo?" And he was like, "Sure." And so so we got this photo of him, and this is just like dog mid yawn and just great. But yeah, so I basically have like a collection of and detailed stories, and not like we're not talking like thousands of words, but detailed stories behind sort of like each of these photos, and
Hmm.
yeah, and it's just like a cool thing where if I want to share this with friends, or maybe share like photos in Japan with friends, like I can do that easily, and also provide like a lot more sort of context behind like the photos as well, in a way that like I wouldn't normally be able to, um on a platform like Facebook or something like that.
I love that. It's like a diary of sorts, or just a way to kind of be mindful. How are you spending your days? And it's just a simple creative activity.
Yeah, exactly. And you can do this with, any sort of like creative endeavor, like anything you're kind of working on. Um, I'm gonna create because I need to go through and like uh, categorize these by like when they were shot, but it's also it'd be really interesting for me to see how it's, like my photography has kind of evolved over the
Oh
years.
yeah.
And just sort of like go into that. But yeah, so that's one example. Anybody like any questions about that? Uh,
It actually reminds me a little bit of the session we did with Lennon Chang that was really great too. I don't know if you saw that one. He's a designer and he
mm,
stores and tracks all of his process work too. And it was cool to just kind of see the evolution of your design work over time too. So there's something really fun about making your progress visible that way.
yes, yes, yeah, and I've seen that like a lot of mood boards from designers and stuff like that, and I think I basically took inspiration from a lot of those things.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so and even well, now Lightroom is having this feature where you can like share your edits with people, and so additional stuff like that, like edit videos, and things of that ilk. I'm planning on sort of including in here, even like original, like sort of the original unedited photo. If I have one example, because it really shows like, oh yeah, like sometimes photo. Well, the original's not loading here, but anyway, it really shows like a lot of times like the photos straight out of the camera like are not that interesting, and it really takes a lot of. Oh, actually, I think this one has the original. No, it doesn't. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so that's
Wow.
for photography, and then yeah, and then so for books, well, so I've two other ones um, that I'd be happy to dig into.
I'm sure both
Book,
are interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
What I love about your book reviews too is like it seems like something public that you share. So like you put this time and effort into summarizing these books, and then it becomes a thing you're kind of able to share with other people, which is really great. Like I just love that willingness to kind of share your note taking and progress in public.
yeah, and I got the idea from Derek Sivers. Like does something very. I mean, he does the exact same thing online. Is like he basically has a digital repository of like everything that he's read, including like reviews and detailed notes and like so on and so forth. So yeah, so I basically sort of adopted that same idea into Notion, and it just makes it that much easier to um, to basically share with people.
Yeah, I
So
love that.
yeah, so like for like for example, like I recently read Permanent Record, which phenomenal book, by the way. If like anybody is at all interested in that story, it's one of the best I've read in a long time.
Mm.
And basically what I like to do is think about, okay, like what are some interesting quotes from the book of course, and like pulling that information. But beyond that, what are maybe some like additional ideas I can dig into? So, for example, in Permanent Record, he brings up this notion of the Frankenstein effect, and sort of like the blowback when you create this monster, and it
Mm.
ends up uh, ends up
Taking on a life of
uh,
its own.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, and so for me, this basically gives me the opportunity to kind of think about these books in a lot more concrete manner, like in a lot more like, okay, what is interesting about that? What is maybe something I can, like in Edward Snowden's case, I'm not, I haven't worked in any government agency enough to be a whistleblower, but But there are some like really interesting sort of like thoughts and ideas and things that like
Mm.
he did in the book. Like, for example, in one section, he pries off a square of a Rubik's Cube and hides a small SD card in there um, for security purposes. But I'm thinking like to myself, I'm like, that would be like an interesting gift idea. Like, what if I basically created a video, put it on a tiny SD card, hid it on a Rubik's Cube, and then like just left it in somebody's apartment, and then like a month or like a year later said like, hey, by the way, have you checked like the top left red square of that Rubik's Cube? And then I put a video on there that's like, hey, what's up? I just wanted to say you are like seriously the most amazing person in my life, and I have adored our friendship, so on and so forth. But that's just how my
Love it.
brain
But that's
works.
what's
Like,
it's so great. Like you're giving yourself space to give yourself, room to experiment and explore other ideas that pop out of these books in a way that's not just like summarizing the main points of the book. It's a little different than that.
yeah, exactly.
It's
And
really interesting.
yeah, and for me, I'm like just a big fan of just going as deep as possible with all of these like absurd ideas, and I constantly have way too many of them. And so yeah, so being able to sort of break things down in a way that I'm not only like connecting with the book or the photo or whatever in a in like a more in a couple different ways. I'm also sort of expanding my knowledge. Is super cool. So
Love it. And so is
yeah,
that a template where those prompts are there? Like I saw there was like a sentence at the beginning there. So do you have a template or
yes,
yeah?
yeah. So I have, and some of these, for better or worse, are still not completely filled out. But yeah, so I have a template that's basically that just has thought experiments and action items, favorite quotes, and
Super
then I'm
simple.
also yeah, and then I'm also going
Mm.
to add a section. Speaking of, maybe I'll do this right now, like additional reading. I think would be pertinent, and then like
Right.
couple links. But yeah, so super simple. And then these criteria, I feel like there's a couple more that I want to add, but I have like read status. So okay, books then that just allows me to look at, okay, what are some books I've recently read. Um, and when I finished, honestly, I don't think is that important,
It's
but
important.
um, um, and then like a favorite quote, rating. Rating, I love. I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, I like rating things, but also at the same time, I'm like, yeah. I mean, but that just helps me be like, yeah, did I enjoy this book? Was it interesting? So on and so forth.
Love it.
But yeah, let's see. What are some of my favorite books? All These Wonders, great book. Cried many times. And Permanent Record, also cried. Great book. Yeah, the rest of it is also very good. But yeah, is this helpful? Is there any aspect of this that anybody would like for me to dig into more?
One thing I was curious about is it seemed like you had a relation to like 2020 books. So is it that you have a kind of a different database for each year or a different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So I have. It's super rudimentary. I'm still not great at like the formula side of things in Notion, which is why I need to read up a lot more on that and study that a bit more. But yeah, I basically have sort of like a well, I have a what my ratings mean guide that just gives people a sense of like, 3 isn't bad, or 2 isn't like bad. It's just just like 3 is just like my general, like if it's a
Like
good book.
it was all right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a good book. 2 is like I probably read it. 1 is one is just no, I didn't really like it. I mean, maybe I read it, but um, yeah. So I have just a. This is more just like for roll up purposes to give me a sense of
Hmm.
like how many books I've read in the year, and I don't know how accurate. I think this might be one off, um, but basically, a sort of catch-all note, and then maybe
That's
I can
cool.
comment, additionally. But I used to have this set up in a way where literally every year was a database item, and then I had every book like in
Connected
here.
to the year.
Yeah, and it was all just in the page, and it just does
A
that
bit
doesn't.
overkill.
Yeah, well, and it also just doesn't give you the ability to easily like surface information. Like if I wanted to find like recently read and stuff, I couldn't even do that. So favorites, and this I think is just like, yeah, um,
Cool.
yeah. So that's a good one. Yeah. Anything else on that end that you'd want me to dig into?
Yeah, let us know in the chat if there's anything that you want to see specifically. But I just love the intention behind, like, not
Foremost,
just
yes.
speed reading, speed reading through a book and not taking the time to make those notes. So it just seems like you're
Yes.
very intentional with your space and yeah, using that consumption to be more creative and put more out there, which is great.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to be, because I think for the entirety of my life, I was just like information, and and you just turn into this like information like super
Consuming
highway.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're just like information, coffee, books, blah blah blah, and then before you know it, you're like, I couldn't tell you what I read
And why do I feel
ever.
tired all the time?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yes, and now I'm trying to just be a lot more thoughtful and sort of intentional about how I go about consuming things, how I go about like just my relationships as a whole, and like that, these are certainly things I'm happy to talk about um, as well. But yeah, so that's the book reviews knowledge hub, and then should I'm happy
We
to
did
also
have
dive into the.
yeah,
Oh,
Danny said, I have missed it, but how do you review past notes of books?
mm, yeah. So typically,
Mm.
that's a good question. If I don't have a copy of the book, that's kind of a challenge. Like
Mm,
if I either don't have the book in Kindle or I don't have a physical copy of the book, then I'm like, all right, let's hope I can maybe. Which is why a lot of these books, especially like in the older ones, don't have detailed
right.
notes. Um, like Darren Greatly, Coming Clean. Like I loved these books. I thought they were really interesting. I couldn't tell you what was the most interesting part. I couldn't,
Right.
Dope Sick. Again, I think I bought this and read it like in New York. Phenomenal book, but I couldn't tell you.
Well,
And
I don't
then,
know. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, and the most annoying thing is when I've been renting a lot of books on Kindle now, and then if I haven't gotten like Ghetto Side, I recently read, phenomenal book. I had so many notes, and then I didn't get an opportunity to archive it.
Oh,
So
shoot. Yeah.
I mean, it's not the end of the world. I'm sure
Well,
I can, but it's
it's
annoying.
related to this conversation, but I don't know if you
Yes.
use Readwise or if anyone here uses Readwise, but Readwise now has an integration with Notion. So you can,
Ooh.
right, if you're highlighting in Kindle or you're saving stuff to Instapaper, highlighting
Oh,
stuff in Medium, you can actually save from multiple sources into Readwise, and then you can export that, and you can set it up to auto sync as well. And so
wow.
I don't necessarily know what that looks like in terms of past things you've read, but when I did that import, it was like stuff I've read 10 years ago or however long I've had Kindle was all imported in. So anything I had highlighted was there in my space, which was amazing. So that might be,
Yeah.
if it's doing that automatically before that expires, like that might be one way to bridge that gap moving forward
Oh,
anyway.
that's genius. Yeah. And is there any way to link it to individual notes?
Like it creates a new entry per book, and then it kind
Okay.
of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ah, okay. That's amazing. That's
It's a great
yes.
it's a great tool. I highly recommend it. I think it's worth the paid version
Yes.
of that. Yeah. Everyone
Yes,
go
100%.
down go check out Readwise.
Yeah, because that would simplify. If I could do that for all of these processes, then that would simplify my entire life. Yeah,
And
I assumed something like that existed.
One thing I've done for old stuff, like for books, again, I don't own anymore. Maybe I pass them on to someone else or whatever. Sometimes I will actually just Google a book summary too, and I'll be like, oh yeah, like someone else's highlights of that, and I'll just kind of copy and paste it into my note just to kind of have like the top level points. Because sometimes I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that book was amazing, but I can't quite articulate what the takeaways were. So for old stuff, I sometimes will do that. I cheat.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and it's, I mean, but isn't that like the point of it? You know,
Mhm.
I mean, you certainly you can learn how to become better at memorizing everything, you know, and read like Moonwalking with Einstein and stuff like that. Or you can just create all this stuff in Notion and then not have to worry about that. I mean, I think you should probably find a balance, but
Totally.
yeah. But
Awesome.
yeah, so that's the book reviews, and
Love
then
it.
I guess the last one I would show, and then would be my sort of like 30 days in Japan, um, sort of like breakdown, and this I'd say is more like a resource guide thing, but basically, um, I wanted to give people everything that they might need to either get to Japan or you know, look into flights or prepare for Japan, or really, I mean, travel. I mean, this could just as easily apply to you know, dozens of other countries, but um, basically give people like all the resources and tools that they might need to travel to Japan. And you know, so like if I have friends that, you know, like before the COVID thing, I had a bunch of friends that were
Right.
supposed to
Wah,
come visit.
wah.
Yeah, and then and so I actually made this at the time to so that before they came, I could be like, hey guys, like by the way, here's a detailed breakdown of like everything you need and like what you should do as soon as you get to the airport. Um, and yeah, so I basically like put together just a breakdown of like what they should buy beforehand, like a rail pass because it makes travel super easy. You know, getting your passport renewed, obviously, if you have to. Um, Big items like you can get shipped to Japan beforehand. You know, mobile SIM cards, like specific like international checking accounts, like stuff like that. Basically, having like a full breakdown of sort of everything that somebody might need.
I can't help but my brain was automatically going to like, oh, could you make it like duplicatable as a template, and then those are check boxes so they can like check them off when they've actually done those things.
Yeah, actually, no, that's a great idea. Yes, yeah. In
It's like, here's
fact,
your checklist. Like, make sure that you did that.
yeah, yeah. No, no, it's a good idea. Yeah, it's a good idea. I didn't
Can't
think
help
about that.
myself.
Yeah, no, I love it.
Like,
Thank you for
how
that.
could we optimize this?
Yes, yes.
um,
No, but like stuff like that, I think is super, super, super cool because
that's
it just gives
fun.
people the. But yeah, so stuff like basically what I'm doing and thinking about a lot more of is like what am I learning, what am I trying to master or get better at, whether that be
Mm,
photography or, you know, learning Japanese or something like that, and how can I put together a resource that's not only like helpful for myself in terms of memorizing stuff better, because you know a lot of these things innately are, but also something that I can then share with people down the road who, you know, if they're trying to read a book that I've previously read, or they're trying to read, or they're trying to do a type of photography that I've previously done, might give them
mhm.
like detailed information about how to do that. So yeah, you
I
know,
love
it's
that.
something I've been thinking about among many other moments
Yeah. I'm
and
trying to do
things.
that myself as well, just that sort of learning in public, and something I sort of committed to. I told my list I would do it was like to share my permaculture learnings, right? Because it's like I'm still learning this stuff too, but I want to share kind of what's been happening behind the scenes. And because, you know, when you share what you're working on and what you're learning and people reflect on it, there's like that feedback loop, right? Then
Hmm.
it just sort of I don't know, just something really nice about that like co-creative learning that elicits more creativity, I think.
Yes. Yeah, and I think it's generally when we get better at something, we become more interested in it, and we also derive more happiness from it.
Yeah.
So if we can take that same approach towards even the most mundane thing, well, I mean, like coffee. Coffee's not I love coffee. Coffee to me is very exciting, but
Yes.
like, oh, having like a coffee database it seems like very mundane, but it's super interesting. If somebody else thinks coffee is interesting, they're gonna be like, wow, that's super cool. Like, and then you can have notes for your favorite types of coffee, where you've gotten it, how you drink
Are
that
they
coffee,
yeah, ethically
ethically
produced or yeah.
sourced. Yeah, exactly. And then before you know it, you're like the coffee guy and or girl, or and yeah. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I know sometimes people criticize quite a bit. They're like, "Oh, haha, like how is this remotely productive when people are working on their Notion spaces and stuff?" And I think there's something interesting there where yes, there is that risk of kind of going down a rabbit hole and spending time tinkering on stuff. But I do think there
mhm.
is also something really delightful about the process of going a little bit deeper on something that you are interested about to see. Like again, like a coffee database might not have been something that you would have thought to do before, but because it's so easy once you've learned how to use the basics of Notion, you're like, well, what else could I use this skill for? What other research have I been meaning to do? And so there is something kind of interesting about that, is like finding the balance. And again, if you're willing to share it, to me, it's worth investing this time in learning Notion, because I know I plan to share it. It's not just knowledge I'm saving for myself. It's like, oh, I'm going to learn how to do this and then hopefully share it and make it easier for someone else to do that.
Yeah, and to your point about getting sort of like sucked into the tool, I think that there's one thing to basically be very passive and just like consuming something like Facebook or Netflix or something like that, and you're just like your brain's just kind of like shut off. And then another thing to be like, well, let's go through all the recent books or coffees or restaurants or whatever that I've been to recently, and I'm going to put together something and actually use my tool in a way that I'm not just basically like getting sucked into my smartphone, and then before you know it, like half my day is gone. I think there's just something to be said about like actually kind of sort of like there's a great quote from the Edward Snowden autobiography that I'm gonna totally mess up, but it basically like if you don't command your tools, your tools will command you.
Yep.
And I think that's super relevant to this stuff. And more and more I'm realizing like that, you know, beyond all of this stuff, like it's cool to have a nice like Notion database with all my readings and stuff like that. Like really at the end of the day, I think what really matters in life is like our relationships and how we connect with people. And
Mm.
a lot of this stuff actually, I
Facilitates that.
yeah, it helps facilitate a lot of it. So
Yeah, Justin said in the chat, I think the process of rearranging and externalizing your thoughts can deepen your learning, just like drawing and doodling can develop your ideas. And yeah, it's almost like the time that I'm spending doing this, like what would I have been doing instead? Or I don't know. You kind of have to find the balance, I think, like you said, of just not doing busy work inside the tool. I know some people say like, oh, how do I go back and retroactively apply this template to all my old journals? I'm like, well, is that like a really good use of your time? Or is it just moving forward from now, you can use these templates? So it's like, you have to discern what's a really high value activity, right? And
yeah.
yeah, we can go on about that, but
Yes, and I would be curious, and I would assume we can't dig into this, but how you define like high value activities and
ooh, yeah, that's a good. There's a really great framework from Taylor Pearson. I'm gonna see if I can share this.
sure.
Taylor Pearson has this yearly review that he did. I'm just grabbing the link because it's sort of a combination of the Eisenhower matrix and so urgency, importance, um, $10,000 tasks, $1,000 tasks, $100 tasks, and $10 tasks. And so he's actually kind of combined a few things and then also unique abilities. So what are the things only I am uniquely suited to do that are easy for me to do? I'm proficient at it. It's where my strength lies. It's like, again, a $10,000 task. It's not a thing my assistant could do. So I just have distilled that into a 4-piece framework. So things are either essential, which is super high value, like it's a really high impact activity that doesn't take me a lot of time. So like it's just so worth doing it because the impact is so high and I can just get it done. Amazing. Deep work, I know, is high value, but it's going to take a lot of focus, a lot of my attention. It's maybe not something I can outsource entirely. So again, it's a little bit nebulous. It's a lot based on my own gut feeling of like, is this a thing that's deep work, or is it a small, I think I call it a small win, or daily grind. Daily grind was $10 tasks I shouldn't be doing. And, I've built my own formulas in Notion too. So if I categorize something there, the little message goes, delegate, like this is not a thing that you should be doing. So that helps me. It's a super simple system. It kind of helps me. I don't stick to anything very strictly in Notion. It's like, this is my general guideline for how I do this. And I'm going to tweak it as I go. But is it really worth spending that much time on the thing? Or is that something I should either outsource, get on, streamline, maybe find a faster way to do it? Right? There's lots of options for kind of how to maybe I need a better template to kind of, I keep reinventing the wheel every time. So that's kind of how I think about it. I'm open to your thoughts on this too, as someone who, wants to spend time doing the stuff that matters. And
well, so so to your point, like as far as like high value stuff, well, can I just, I'll show you like how I sort of like go about my day. And
love it, yeah.
And that this is actually missing a lot of sort of context as far as like my sort of like roadmap and things I want to do and so on and so forth. But for me, I basically want to spend as much time working on things that are I think I'm good at and that I'm uniquely sort of like qualified for, and that don't feel like just kind of like busy tasks where I'm spending like, which again, like you need to find that balance and sort of like doing a lot of this Notion stuff, but this is like my daily digest, and basically I start my day with like just a quick reflection and meditation, and this is based off of probably like dozens of other templates that I've kind of borrowed it from. But I basically want to set my day up in a way that I don't have to like think about what I'm going to be doing. And it just like tells me, because otherwise I've tried the whole like calendar your day in the morning thing, and it didn't work for me for a while. And I think it's because the act of like having to go into my calendar and think about what I need to do was always such a struggle for me. So now instead I find that I derive a lot of my enjoyment, but B, a lot of sort of, I think my value comes from sort of like writing and just continuing to sort of like grow and build upon my writing. So every morning I spend, at least like an hour or two writing, and I try to write at least like 500 to 1,000 words. Often it's more, but basically, these are sort of like my works in progress. So I have.
And can I ask, like these little blocks here, are they all entries that you did today, or?
No.
It's like you're
prolific.
Teach me the ways.
No. So these are basically just all my in progress pieces. So over the last couple of weeks, I try to like send out like 2 emails a week, and usually, and they're usually pretty extensive, like 1,000 to like 2,000 words. So I have, basically like just a list of kind of ongoing, things that I'm like working on and ideas and like so on and so forth. And some of these might be like kind of more brief emails. Like this one, maybe, nope, it's actually not that brief. But But like the goal is basically I just want it all laid out in front of me, and I don't want to
Yeah.
have to like think about it. And then I can just pick one and be like, oh, you know what? This
I
one's
love
good.
this break time.
Yeah. And so yeah, and it's supposed to be GIF, but I guess it's just a it's just a
They can't
blurry
handle
picture
it.
of empty hair. Yeah. And then and then I have like task databases, which I'll like drop tasks into. And then after then basically in the afternoon I typically have like a handful of projects and things that I need to do, and I'm working on surfacing these based on like urgency. Like I'm just not good
Mm.
at formulas, so for me for me to do that, usually it would require some like manual
Should reach out
labor.
to Danny in the chat. He's got some pretty, or check out his YouTube channel. He's got some great how to do formula stuff.
Okay, cool.
Definitely check
Good
it
to
out.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could drop a link in the chat, that'd be great. Yeah, so but like for here, basically I just have, in my afternoon, I have like these five or that I'm gonna pick one of these. I'm not gonna work on all of these, but I have a bunch of different projects. Okay, what are some things that I need to do? What are some things that are urgent? So on and so forth. This is interesting. It changes because I'm used to the desktop app. It changes
Uh,
your views.
It'll always default to the view that's at the top. So if you want it to
And
always default to
yeah,
the board, then you can drag it up. There you
noted. Okay, cool.
go.
Good. Yeah. So I guess if you're always on the desktop app, you won't see that until you log into
Yeah,
the
yeah.
web app. Yeah. But
So wait,
yeah.
tell me about
So
this Productivity 50 too. Like what's
yeah. Well, so I'm basically thinking about like, okay, who are some people I want to connect with more? Who are some people I want to potentially like partner with and like figure out ways to
cool.
do that. You see you're on here. Because I love
Cool.
your work and I've learned so much from you. But basically I'm just putting together like, okay, who are some people that I want to like connect with and, potentially work together with and like figure out a way to work with. And yeah, so.
Love it. It sounds like some other folks have been trying to figure out their morning ritual routine. So it's really interesting for me to see too, because I think I spend a lot of time in the weekly view, and this is really nice that just to have, a daily digest of kind of, like you said, it tells you what to do.
Yes. No, I think it just basically like forces me to not think about my day. Because if I have to like think about what I need to put in my calendar and like what I need to do, like I just get overwhelmed and then I default to like Netflix or
Totally. Yeah.
whatever. So this way I'm like, all right, I know I've got a couple pieces and posts that I'm working on. I have some particular projects that I want to work on in the afternoon, and like it just kind of goes from there.
Love it. Really cool.
Yeah. But it's it's a constant evolution.
I think that's important for people to know too, right? Because it's it's so easy. People they want the templates, right? They're like, oh, give me the Marie HQ. But if your workflow or the way you think about your tasks or all of that it doesn't align with the way that I work, it's not going to be applicable. So everyone's space looks so different, right? And this is totally designed to the way that you operate. And so I think it's important for people to remember it doesn't have to. There is no
Yes.
way that your workspace needs to look, and it's going to take time for you to iterate on it, and that's kind of part of the process, is like notice what's easy, notice where there's friction, and I think, like you said, even the very top of your page has that meditation. It's like, I want better relationships, I want to be more mindful. Put that, bake that into your everyday in a way that's like super visible.
Yes. Well, and beyond that, I find if you are forced to like do anything that requires you to hop on like social media or do anything that requires you to hop on like YouTube or whatever, it's so I mean, the way those things are designed is to like suck your attention away from
I
like
did see
things that
digital
are
minimalism in your book recommendations, right? Digital minimalism.
yes, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly. So I'm basically just reciting everything I read, and these are not new ideas, and certainly
Yeah.
nothing original that I came up with. Um, but I agree with and align with a lot of that stuff because it's so easy, and then before you know it, you're working 60, 80 hour weeks and wondering why you don't have time to like do the things that are really important to you, like hanging out with your family or like working
Or,
on lab
yeah.
or whatever.
It's like you spent the full day working and maybe even working late, but have you really been effective, right?
Yes, yes, and before, I'd say like a couple of months ago, I was in this and I think we all go through phases of this, like where you're just working endlessly, and then you realize you're like, wait, why am I doing
Why am
this?
I doing this?
Yeah, like what is this
What
like?
is this all for?
Yeah, and then like you're not making any, more money than you were making, and like you're not getting the time to do the things that you actually want to do, and then like at some point you're just like, wait, what am I doing? Why is this happening?
Reset.
Um,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that also coincided with COVID, so that helped. That was a nice little.
Yes, the forced
But
slowdown.
exactly. But yeah, so that's kind of this is how my brain works. Yeah.
Really, really cool. And I'm just curious too, as you said, like whenever you feel like you get into those modes where you're just kind of working and maybe like losing sight of the big picture, is there anything that you do as an activity or within your space where you're like, okay, how do you press the reset button a little bit? Do you have a page where you have your sort of values or goals or like bigger picture stuff that kind of inspires you?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Not that
Yes.
you have to share, but I was just curious
Yeah.
what
No,
your.
I'm okay with. I mean, I honestly like even when I'm sharing this stuff, I'm like, there's probably going to be something of like like whatever.
Yeah.
But so I have sort of like my tasks and roadmap area, which this was actually I basically adopted or got this from Conrad Lynn's gamification template, and then
Yeah.
I think I've since removed all like the gamification aspects just because I was using that for a while and I was like, oh, that's interesting, and then eventually I just kind of grew numb to like the gold and XP and stuff like that. But I do actually really like the his community that he's built, and I think it's super cool. But so I have like bird's eye tasks. But even before the step before this, I will go to um, up, areas. So in Miro, I will basically map out
Ah,
my sort of like, okay, what is my like vision for sort of like how I want to create a better world for myself or
I
others?
love that.
And I'm like, okay, cool. If the core of that is building meaningful relationships that create life-changing experiences, what are the different components and things that sort of go into that? So for me, it's you need. I think of all these things as like rocket ships. Like ideas are the rocket ship, then income and revenue is the fuel, the people, like getting people like on board, or like the astronauts, and then you know more ideas and creativity are sort of like you're building more rocket ships. This is
I
how my
love
brain
that.
works. If it
Yeah.
sounds like a weird acid trip, like
I
um
love it.
but yeah, and so basically I everything kind of like branches out from that like core thing, which is like I
Your
want to
central
build.
purpose.
Yeah, exactly. I want to build more meaningful relationships that generate and create life-changing experiences. Okay, if that's the core, what are these things that I'm doing? Are they related to that? Like, are they adding to that? And if the answer is no, then like, why am I doing it? And then and then
Love it.
you start going to therapy, and you're like, well, because like your parents didn't pay enough attention to you, and yeah, but I mean, but that's basically
Yeah.
that's
I
how
love
it
that.
works. Yeah.
Um, There was a question that came in as
Sure.
Asante. Would be curious to see the places to check out Resource Hub if you're open to sharing that. And I think your book reviews
Yes.
are also is like a public thing you're willing to share. So we can certainly drop in any links that you want to share.
Yeah. Let me, because I'm gonna be adding all this to my. I have like an ongoing page that's just
Cool.
Notion HQ, and it also yeah,
We
and
can
it
add
also has
that.
a link to like great courses, like yours, for example,
Awesome.
and other like communities and stuff. So basically, I think that's live and working right now. Let's double check. But yeah, yeah, if you
Beautiful.
just go to mikekilcoyne.com/Notion HQ, I'm
Love it.
basically, yeah, I'm basically like working on updating this as much as possible with like templates that I use, what that looks like. Access to any of my other templates. And so basically, if anybody wants to duplicate any of this stuff, they can.
Mm.
And yeah, yeah, that's basically
Love
the
it.
gist. Yeah, was this
Yeah,
helpful?
Oh, I mean, I always love seeing other people's spaces, and I think,
Cool.
the hope is that everyone gets something, right? Even if like, oh, cool, like, they might have come for the knowledge hub, but then they see the daily view and they're like, oh, that's really interesting. So I think there's always something to be learned when we see how other people set
Yeah,
up their workspaces. And so a couple questions have come in, and again, if you have anything that
sure.
has popped up that you want us to mention, definitely add it to the ask a question area. But some of these we may or may not have covered in the process too, like.
Yeah,
Bob
or
was
may or
asking.
may not be able to cover. Let's see. Yeah,
Yeah, we may not have time, so we'll see what we can
sure,
get
sure, sure.
through.
Yeah, I mean,
Bob asked,
I'm okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, let me know as soon as you got to go. I know sometimes we go a little later on these office
No, we're
hours.
good.
Bob was asking, how do you link ideas from different sources?
Okay. So I'm not great at this. And I think you probably have a much better understanding of formulas and linking to different sources. But um, and I would imagine when you say like linking to different sources, are you talking about
Yeah,
different
Bob.
like?
Bob, let us know in the chat if you can
Can you
clarify. But I
clarify
wonder
that?
if it's how you collect. Yeah, I'm not. How do you link? How do you link
Yeah.
ideas from different sources? So maybe it's an idea related to a book. Like, do you have a central ideas database, or?
Mm,
Um,
I would say. I mean, I would say that's kind of my Miro thing is like my central. Or are you talking about like something similar to like the resonance calendar
yeah,
that
I think
Ollie
so.
created? Okay. I don't, so I'm actually working on that's like my massive list of to-dos for Notion is creating something similar to that. Like as far as
Cool.
ideas, as far as like things I want to work on or things I want to like develop, is that
Yeah,
the
I'm not
question?
sure if Bob's here and wants to clarify any
Okay.
of that. We can maybe
I
try
think
and dig a
Bob's
little bit
gone.
deeper.
Well,
Sorry, Bob.
let's assume yeah, I mean for me it's more a lot of it's just like in my head and okay, what things and this might not even be answering his question at all, but like what things are compelling and interesting to me. And so for example, I've been since Japan, every restaurant is amazing. And so I've just been compiling sort of at least in my head, and then I'm going to put this into like my Notion calendar, and then I'll actually add this to the 30 days in Japan template. But I'm working on putting together like favorite restaurants, favorite coffee shops, like detailed notes about all those different places, and so on and so forth. So that's
Fun.
on my
Yeah.
list. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's like there's never a shortage of
I know.
new ideas to develop, right?
Yeah, and then before you know it, you're like, oh my god, I have too many things. Yeah, it's very easy to get caught up in that.
Totally. Todd was asking, how do you structure your pages to be the most malleable as you're thinking?
Mm. I think that's a lot of sort of what happens in my say here. Let me share my book reviews page.
Like it almost seems like there's certainly, at least I feel this way, there's like core databases that don't really change, and then if like a new context emerges, you can make a new page and like start changing up the way that you store that information?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, as my thinking changes around, say, like books, for example, like if I want to add, um, uh, which like related reading or something like that. So um, a lot of that stuff is going to happen in the page itself, like in the text area. So quotes and things of that ilk. So the database itself doesn't really have to change. But if there's, say, if I'm realizing that I really want like a new category that's like 3 research articles, so I can quickly
Mm.
find that and then be able to sort um, quickly by research articles, then I'll do that. It's basically, for me, the database items are a way to sort information, and so you want to basically have the pertinent information that's possible there that would allow you to sort that in an interesting way, or in a way that for you helps you surface the most interesting information. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question. Did I
Yeah,
did
let
I
us know,
answer your
Todd.
question without answering your question?
No, let us know. It's always sometimes tricky, and also even to know like what level people are at, because I notice sometimes beginners maybe aren't aware of how easy it is to move information around Notion. So if it's like, oh no, I have this database, but like you can change your mind, or maybe you can
Hmm.
decide I just want to create a page and nest this database inside it and still have room to do free form writing while also having databases. So there is a lot of flexibility and room to move it around.
Yeah,
I know certainly. Okay, Todd got some kernels from that. I
cool,
think
good. That's
I
good.
think partly you have to use it to really know. Like I feel like personally, there you can't really skip a bit of that awkward, messy middle when you're like, I'm not sure where to sort this. And over time,
Yeah,
as you're maybe dumping things into a page, and you're like, oh, I see that there's like a pattern emerging. I'm always saving podcast episodes. I'm always saving books. It takes a bit of time, I think, to craft the way of organization that's going to make the most sense for you. Um, Notion
yeah,
itself is pretty malleable, so you've got some room to play with it a
yes.
little bit. Yeah.
And you could, in theory, as a lot of people do with, say like Ollie's, why do I Resonance Calendar? Basically, he combines various different, videos, articles, so basically anything that kind of resonates with him.
Mhm.
And you can do that. I think the challenge with that is that once you start getting your database starts getting pretty big, as it might with
Mhm.
any amount of like books or articles and things of that, like, then it just becomes like more and more challenging to like quickly sort of like pull out the information you want. And
Right.
obviously you can fix that with filtering pretty quickly, actually, but still, I think for me, having like one database for I'm okay with that. Like,
Yeah.
if it doesn't have all my articles and stuff, and that's a separate database, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
over time you'll figure out yeah, what works for your
exactly,
uh
exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Any other interesting?
I'm not
I had a
sure how
category.
like yeah, how much time we'll be able to get into some of this stuff, but
Sure.
yeah, what's your specific process for capturing new entries, editing them, retrieving them for creation of content and sharing?
Yeah. So, well, now moving forward, it's going to be using Readwise, since
Mm.
since since a lot of my things are, at least for
Yep.
my books.
Kindle.
Yeah. But then for, again, it's not sexy. A lot of it's just like manual. It's effort. It's me sitting down on a Sunday for a couple hours being like, what did I read? Okay, great. And then I go through this is what I was doing, but I can't believe it's one of those things where like you're like, wait, why am I doing this the hard way? And then somebody's like, oh, here's a really easy way to do this thing. And you're like, duh.
You're like not even wanting to think about how
Yeah.
many hours you spent on the other way. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so to answer your question, basically what I'll do is I'll take, a couple hours on Sunday, and then no, okay, I recently took these photos, or maybe I recently read these books, or or here's something that I really want to think about, which is like, what are my favorite restaurants, and like, what are some of the best places like I've been to recently, and then and then just start compiling that into a database, and thinking about, okay, like, what information do I need to make this also really valuable for someone else? So, for
Mm,
example, if I'm putting together a, for me, having interesting maybe action items, additional reading, maybe just sort of like an overall review of books, I think is really interesting. For restaurants, having location, maybe having suggested food items, maybe giving people a sense of like the vibe, so like
mm,
if they're looking for, like a chill night, and then, your place is like electronic dance music atmosphere, then, probably not the vibe, but
I
stuff
love
like
it.
that, like basically helping people through your database and the information you're providing, helping them answer some of the questions like they might have about how you do what you do, or have why you find this interesting, or so on and so forth.
That's really cool. It
Yeah.
Your travel thing also reminded me, like I did this years ago when I went to Hawaii. Is I had a moleskin notebook and I was taking all those sorts of notes of like, oh, places to stay
Ah,
and all this stuff. But then I mailed it to a friend of mine because she was going to Hawaii for the first time, and I was like, she's probably going to have her own tips of what's going to happen there. And so she actually added to the moleskin and then sent it back. And so it's like Notion is sort of a digital version of what we were trying to do with this moleskin that we were mailing back and forth.
yeah. Oh, wow. That's so cool. Yeah, but I think we're also losing a lot of that analog stuff.
Yeah,
And that's so cool. Like, that's not something you can easily recreate in a Notion
totally.
database.
I think
And
something exciting in the mailbox too, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
like you get this physical thing, and then like maybe it has photos and stuff. That's a super cool idea. I'm gonna
Might have to
borrow that
steal that
from
one.
yes, 100%.
Meanwhile, I'll be mailing people Rubik's cubes with SDK cards nested inside them, and yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Why? I mean, it stuff like that. I think that's like, it's because this is never going to be a replacement for actual, human interaction and connection, and it's never. But if you can combine this, and then also, maybe even combine it with something like that, like, you I don't know, you print all these out into like a booklet that people can go through for restaurant recommendation, something like that.
or
If
just
you
being
can
willing to share this with other people and say like, hey, do you want to add to this repository? Like, there's something fun, and it changes the whole. Just changes the whole nature of your space when you're willing to trust other people to contribute to it as well, and it's going to become something new.
Yeah, yeah, and that's another thing I need to think about too, because for me, these are just things I'm creating and
Yeah,
controlling and managing. But what if I was like, hey friend, like I curated 4 or 5 friends who I know have great tastes in restaurants, and asked them to add, a bunch of
yeah.
restaurants to the Kyoto suggestions. Yeah, yeah,
And it could
I,
be
I
who
love
who
that.
added this entry too, right? So you have, oh,
Exactly.
always
Yes,
love
like
Alex's
Joe's recommend.
recommendations. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then you're like,
I love
actually,
that.
I don't know if I trust Alex's recommendations anymore. Like, he recommended McDonald's.
He said
Yeah,
two
but
misses. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, but it's
Oh, I
fun.
love it.
It's
I
fun.
love it. No, I love that leaning toward, even when you said building your spaces with the idea that you were going to share it in the first place, and what is going to
100%.
be useful for other people is just it's a really interesting lens to look at things. And I'm a big proponent or fan of, if I were to drop a complete stranger in my space, I feel like it should be fairly intuitive where they would need to go to find what they need to find. Like, it's
Yes.
probably, easy
Yes.
to, things are named appropriately. It's easy to navigate. You're not having to click and get lost. It's very straightforward.
Right. Right. I think, and that's something I'm trying to get better at, because that's, I mean, Notion, I just remember the learning curve initially, it wasn't complicated, but it's like, there's so much you can do.
Mm.
And so getting your like day set up in a way that like works for you definitely takes some learning, but I think once you get past that, then you're like, wow, this is the
Smooth sailing. It's templated. You've got your system in place. Yeah, it's like that time up front for long-term gain.
yes. And then should we? Well, I don't know
I know
how we're doing on
we've
time.
gone over.
I'm okay with answering a couple more questions. I know Dr. Susan
Dr.
Bernstein.
Susan, yeah, she was asking about how to organize a ton of resources like handouts, articles, links, frameworks that I share with my executive coaching clients into an easy to use repository where I could call up those resources when I need them and share curated collections for specific clients.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend referring to, and maybe we can link it here, Ollie's resonance calendar, because I think he talked about this on the Crowdcast, right?
And I think it would depend if you're only sharing certain resources with certain clients, or if it's
Yeah,
a resource library that you're willing to share with all clients. And I think that would depend, because you can do things
yeah,
like embed databases into other pages and maybe filter them by certain views, but people will still be able to click to the original database and see the full thing. So
right.
those privacy permissions, it would depend, I think, on how I would recommend approaching that.
Yeah, which is like, I honestly, for me, I've probably gone too far on the. I'm just like, you can look at all my goals and tasks and stuff like that. But at the same time, you want to have like some things that are like just your own stuff. So yes, but I think the resonance calendar would be
Could be a
good.
good start for that.
Yeah, it would be a good start for that. But then for me, I would in Dr. Susan's case, for something like that, I would basically just create a maybe even like a client focused database. I mean, you don't want to create more work for yourself and basically have like duplicate databases that you're
Yeah.
contributing to, because the challenge is then eventually you're not going to update. It's unless you're just really diligent, and then again, you're just adding some more work to your plate. I would just have I would imagine, resources and stuff like that. You can create a sort of catch-all database that would be interesting to everyone, and that you would be comfortable sharing with anyone. And then have maybe a filter,
like a type.
Yeah,
and
like
then client.
exactly, like like a genre, not necessarily like a genre filter, but maybe like it's like a video filter. I'm trying to think if I have a good
It's like
example.
type equals handout or article or link or frame. Like you could have a type field, and then you could also
I can just like make one right now.
And then you could have a client template. Like maybe there's a client database and there's a template that you have, and then each client could have their own dashboard that you'd invite them into, but you'd be embedding your central database that is like global, and every single client would have access to all those same resources.
Exactly. Yeah. And then basically you could create, like, for example, I have a sort of like wiki, with a client, and I can just
So you have a new client one there.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think.
It's always like, oh, can I share this?
Yeah. That's this stuff, because I mean, honestly, there's really not much here. Okay, production. Yeah, but basically, you can put together sort of like a database and have have a section that's designed specifically for
Yeah,
writing.
and also I know with coaching too, sometimes you're like taking people through a process over time. So it could even be like week 1, and then that could filter. You could filter some resources, whether they're time based or whatever, right? And you could really kind of choose how you want to display that. I know there's like so many nuances with this particular use case, and so many different ways you could deliver it. But
yes, basically you can, and there was a crowdcast you did, I think a couple of weeks ago with he's like CEO of like a super tools.
We had a couple guests because it was the guy who created Super. Super dot.
No,
Is it SO?
I
No.
think that sounds about right.
Oh, shoot.
But he was showing how he has like basically a feed of articles, and then he has it set up in a way where basically every time like he has clicked, he has read it. You know, there's a checkbox,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
it disappears from his list.
Tommy, maybe that was Tommy Barav. His
Yes,
question was
Tommy.
awesome. Yeah.
I think that's right. Yes,
He had that like the daily OS and stuff. He's got some great, yeah, I love his setup.
totally,
Where he did that. So that might be
totally.
worth checking out, Susan. And I'm in the What Works network with Dr. Susan too. So I'm going to reach out to her personally too. We can chat about that.
Cool.
And then the last two questions were, another one
Yeah.
popped in too. Pretty late here in the EU, wondering if adding tags to a page is possible to achieve an experience like Obsidian and Rome offer. I'm collecting a lot of quotes and would like to tag them with wisdom, health, war, fun, but at the same time filter by author. I think databases and their filters might be too static to quickly find a quote with two specific tags. I'd be curious your thoughts on that, but I definitely use a quotes database that is connected to my Knowledge Hub, and I've never found it tricky to find a quote by tag. I use a master tag database as well that may, the short answer to your question though is no, you can't tag a page. So, and I do think something like quotes, especially as you said you're collecting a lot and they have tags, I would definitely use a database for that. I think that's the perfect use case for it. And maybe a different view option would make that quicker for you to find. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Michael. I know yours were done as like inline in the body of the page.
Yeah, well, for something like that, if you're just strictly doing quotes, then yeah, I would create a to your point, basically like I would create a separate database item for each quote, and then have separate tags for surfacing that based off of, you know, like health, war, fun, wisdom. Yeah, and I'm sure you have a good yes. I mean,
so these are from Readwise, right? Readwise actually produces these nice little visuals here, but yeah, you can see I could refine these and filter these by quotes if I wanted to. So just filter by tags contained.
Interesting.
Strategy.
Okay. Yes. You know, I'm so excited to
kittens.
use this. Kittens.
Best self. I think there's a bunch in
yeah.
here. There you go. Right. So,
and there's still some manual effort, I assume, in terms of like tagging them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Adding the tags in there. Yeah, I found it pretty. I could filter them by author. I could filter them by. I think I'd, you know, online. If I related it to an online course, or, you know, where did I find that information? Sometimes I put it in additional info in the body. I think I even have a shared. And so sometimes if I share that on Instagram or something like that, like I just want a record that, yes, I did actually post that somewhere. Maybe I tweeted about it and that sort of thing. So yeah, I know it's personal preference, but I like this method of kind of tracking them somewhat visually, and then so searchable by any number of these. Like, let's do it by author, right? Let's show me all these different people.
Wow. I love this.
Lots of options.
I'm gonna create a Readwise account immediately.
So yeah, Readwise, that's the fun part. I could even show you what that I should show you what that Readwise database looks like.
And then it connects to oh my god. What have I been doing my entire life? Not.
So it's pretty simple. Like, it just pulls them in with these location tags too. And when you click on it, it actually takes you to that spot. I don't know if it's in Kindle or just in Readwise.
Yes.
And then, yeah, last highlighted, last synced. I can jump into the Amazon book right away. I can connect it to another item in the Knowledge Hub if there's another book that's connected to. So this was all. None of this was manual. This was totally imported, generated by Readwise. I didn't do a thing.
Yeah.
So
this is way better. Yeah.
It's so pretty, right?
Yes. Yeah. No. This is I think a way smarter solution.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
sweet.
Hope that helps on the quoting, tagging. I think that there's a lot of potential there.
Yes, I love that. Love it.
And I promise we'll let you go soon.
No worries.
Marie, one quote to you: learned, loved, and lived. Thanks. Amazing. Any other aspects of your various resources, databases that link together?
Mm. That's a good question. I mean, resource databases, no. Like as far as connecting two separate databases to one another.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't seem like you had a ton of relational databases. Yours are kind of
No.
context focused, which is
Y-
fine.
Yeah, yeah, not a ton. In and this is just a byproduct of like the tasks roadmap. But in using sort of the game of Conrad Lynn's like sort of initial gamification template, there's a lot of databases in terms of like connecting projects to tasks and so on and so forth. But as far as the databases that I use, like the book reviews and stories and things of that ilk, not so much. No. Yeah, that's still an area like I'm kind of exploring and figuring out like the relational databases.
Yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
if it's working and you don't need to, right? There's no need to. Only if you're hitting up upon some friction, you're like, this is like not
Yeah.
working, or I want to connect my ideas,
Yeah, but now I feel insecure that I don't have like enough relational database information in there, and I'm like, should I? Should 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 I connect it with like should photography and reading be connected? Because I
Oh,
don't know.
every time I see, I'm like, oh no, I need a video to like open up my day, and I need like you can't help it when you see
Yes. Oh my
someone's
God.
face.
That there definitely is a lot of like FOMO and
Notion
like
envy,
and then,
FOMO.
yeah, and then you look at somebody's like templates or like something they're doing and it's so much easier and better and you're just like, what am I doing with my
Gotta
life?
burn it all to the ground. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, all right, well, I'm going back to pen and paper anyway. So yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we've covered most of the stuff that we needed to cover, and yeah, I'd love to
Yeah,
hear if
I
this
think so.
was useful for folks. Is there something specific that you're gonna take away and maybe work on in your own spaces? I'd love to hear. One of the approaches that I'm using as I set up Notion is to mind map my areas. It helps me in determining relationships and should data elements be in a table or in a tag. Still in progress. Time will tell. All that FOMO, yeah, it sounds like people can relate to having a little bit of that Notion FOMO.
Yes.
Danny, who's in the chat, if you want to post your YouTube, I think someone already did post that, but if you want to post that, Danny's got some great videos that go over
Yeah.
some formula stuff, and there may be some like really simple formulas that could just help out with some of the stuff that you're trying to do.
Met you curious. I'm working on combining Japanese with English into one. It's fun. It's fun.
That's awesome.
What a fun language.
Yeah.
Danny Hatcher on YouTube. Cool. Done. Yes. All right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks everyone. And I hope this was helpful, useful. It's always fun to see other people's stuff. We've added Mike's resources at the bottom there. So I think you've shared your book summary and a couple other things with us.
Yes.
So
yeah, I have all those in the thing. Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Super fun. Yeah, it's always
I love
good
sharing
to
this
see.
stuff.
Yeah. No, it's always inspiring. I always come away with some nugget of inspiration. So thank you so much. Yeah.
I'm glad. All right.
Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.